the dark and painful truth of living in the US is rarely discussed. In a nation built on dreams, many face harsh realities daily. From systemic racism to economic disparity, the American dream often feels out of reach. How did we get here? Let's uncover the truth. Chapter 1. The sky-high cost of living. Housing in America has reached crisis levels, particularly in major cities. San Francisco, for instance, saw median home prices rocket to over $1.4 million by 2020. Even tech workers who earn above average salaries struggle to afford homes, leading to a rising homeless population. New York City isn't any better. Manhattan's average rent for a one-bedroom apartment hit $3,500 per month in 2019. Many residents either move to less desirable areas or endure cramped living conditions. Los Angeles is another prime example. By 2021, the city had nearly 60,000 homeless people, a direct result of soaring housing costs. Meanwhile, Detroit faced a foreclosure crisis in the early 2000s. Over 100,000 homes were foreclosed between 2005 and 2015, displacing countless families and exacerbating homelessness. Healthcare costs in the US are another daunting challenge. The price of insulin tripled from 2002 to 2013, forcing many diabetics to ration their medication, often with fatal consequences. Medical expenses are a leading cause of bankruptcy, with a 2019 study showing 66.5% of bankruptcies tied to medical issues. Childbirth costs are exorbitant too. In 2015, an uncomplicated childbirth averaged $10,000, and complications could double or triple this figure. Prescription drug prices in the US are also sky-high compared to other developed countries. For instance, Lipitor, a common cholesterol medication, costs 2.5 times more in the US than in Canada, placing a heavy financial burden on those needing regular medication. Chapter 2. The rich getting richer. The income gap in the US is glaring. During the pandemic in 2020, Jeff Bezos, Amazon's founder, saw his wealth increase by $70 billion while millions of Americans lost their jobs. Walmart, a giant retailer, pays many of its workers near minimum wage, even though the Walton family, who owns Walmart, ranks among the wealthiest people globally. CEO pay further illustrates this disparity. In 2019, the average CEO earned 320 times more than the typical worker, highlighting the vast income divide. The stock market boom during the COVID-19 pandemic benefited wealthy investors immensely, while the working class faced severe economic uncertainty. Tax practices of the wealthy further widen the gap. Apple, despite being one of the richest companies, uses complex strategies to avoid billions in taxes, depriving public services of crucial funds. The 2016 Panama Papers leak exposed how the wealthy, including many Americans, use offshore accounts to evade taxes. The carried interest loophole allows hedge fund managers to pay lower tax rates than regular workers, while the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act significantly reduced corporate taxes, benefiting shareholders but doing little to improve wages or job growth for the average worker. Chapter 3. The struggles of youth. Student debt crisis. The student debt crisis is crippling young Americans. Since 1980, college tuition costs have surged by over 1,200%, far outpacing inflation and wage growth. As of 2020, the average student loan debt was around $30,000 per borrower, impacting their ability to buy homes, start families, or save for the future. The debate over debt forgiveness, championed by figures like Senator Bernie Sanders, highlights the financial strain on young adults. Moreover, over 11% of student loans were in default by the end of 2019, showcasing the severe financial pressure on graduates struggling to repay their debts. Youth in the US face significant mental health challenges. The CDC reported that in 2019, 1 in 5 adolescents experienced a major depressive episode, with many struggling to access adequate mental health care. Social media exacerbates these issues, correlating heavy use with increased anxiety and depression among teens due to cyberbullying and unrealistic standards. School shootings add to the stress. The rise in such incidents has created an environment of fear and anxiety for many students, leading to heightened PTSD. Unfortunately, many schools lack sufficient mental health resources, leaving students without the necessary support. Chapter 4. Sky-high suicide rates. Suicide rates in the US have climbed by 33% from 1,999 to 2019, with middle-aged white men and veterans particularly affected. For youth aged 10 to 34, suicide is the second leading cause of death, driven by social pressure, academic stress, and mental health issues. Veterans face a severe crisis, with approximately 17 veterans dying by suicide each day, reflecting the mental health challenges faced by those who have served in the military. Rural areas see nearly twice the suicide rate of urban areas, driven by isolation, limited access to mental health care, and economic hardship. The story of Madison Holleran, a University of Pennsylvania student and athlete who took her own life in 2014, highlights the pressures faced by young people in competitive environments. The death of Robin Williams in 2014 brought national attention to the struggles of mental illness, even among those who appear successful. Farmer suicides are another alarming trend. Economic stress and isolation have led to a high suicide rate among American farmers. The release of 13 Reasons Why, a show depicting teen suicide, sparked national debate and concern over its potential impact on vulnerable youth. Chapter 5. The Gig Economy and Job Insecurity. The gig economy promises flexibility but often delivers insecurity. Uber and Lyft drivers work long hours for low pay, with no access to benefits like health insurance or retirement plans, leading to economic instability. Amazon warehouse workers face grueling conditions, high productivity quotas, and limited job security, contributing to physical and mental stress. Freelancers also struggle with unstable income and lack of benefits, while the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated job insecurity, leaving many gig workers without income or access to unemployment benefits. California's AB 5 law, aimed at classifying gig workers as employees rather than independent contractors, faced significant resistance from companies like Uber and Lyft, but sought to provide better protections for workers. Unionization efforts at companies like Amazon and Starbucks have sought better wages, working conditions, and job security, often facing significant resistance from employers. The Fight for $15 movement advocates for raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, aiming to lift millions of workers out of poverty. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the crucial role of low-wage workers became evident, as many risked their health without adequate protection or compensation. Chapter 6. Health Disparities. Healthcare disparities are stark in the US. African Americans and Hispanics face higher rates of chronic diseases and lower access to quality healthcare compared to whites. Rural areas often lack adequate healthcare facilities and professionals, leading to poorer health outcomes for residents compared to urban settings. The US has the highest maternal mortality rate among developed countries, with significant racial disparities. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act has been a contentious issue, with states that have not expanded Medicaid leaving millions without access to affordable health care. The opioid epidemic is a dark chapter in American healthcare. Purdue Pharma's aggressive marketing of OxyContin contributed significantly to the crisis, leading to widespread addiction and overdose deaths. Families and communities have been devastated, losing loved ones to addiction. The economic cost of the opioid epidemic is staggering, with healthcare expenses, lost productivity, and criminal justice costs amounting to billions annually. Efforts to combat the crisis include increased funding for addiction treatment, stricter regulations on prescription opioids, and lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies. Chapter 7. Educational Inequality. Public schools in the US are funded largely by property taxes, leading to significant disparities. Wealthier areas benefit from higher property tax revenues, resulting in better facilities and resources, while schools in poorer areas struggle with underfunding. The 2019 college admissions bribery scandal exposed how wealthy families could buy their children's way into elite universities, highlighting the inequalities in the education system. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the digital divide, with many low-income students lacking access to the necessary technology for remote learning, exacerbating educational disparities. The school-to-prison pipeline disproportionately affects disadvantaged students, particularly minorities, funneling them into the criminal justice system and hindering their educational prospects. Underfunded schools in low-income areas often lack basic supplies, experienced teachers, and extracurricular opportunities, impacting students' educational outcomes and future opportunities. Over 1.5 million public school students were reported as homeless during the 2017 to 2018 school year, facing significant barriers to academic success. But students with disabilities often do not receive the support and resources they need, leading to inadequate educational outcomes and limited future opportunities. Many schools, particularly in rural and low-income areas, face severe teacher shortages, affecting the quality of education students receive. Chapter 8. Criminal justice issues. Mass incarceration. The US has the highest incarceration rate in the world, with over 2 million people in prisons and jails. This disproportionately affects African American and Hispanic communities. The for-profit prison industry has been criticized for prioritizing profit over rehabilitation, often providing substandard conditions and services. Three strikes laws, mandating life sentences for repeat offenders, have contributed to overcrowded prisons and disproportionately impacted minority and low-income individuals. The war on drugs has led to mass incarceration for non-violent drug offenses, disproportionately affecting communities of color. Police brutality and racial bias. The killing of George Floyd by a police officer in 2020 sparked nationwide protests and renewed calls for police reform and accountability. Racial profiling means African Americans are more likely to be stopped, searched, and arrested by police, leading to a lack of trust in law enforcement and the justice system. The legal doctrine of qualified immunity protects police officers from being sued for misconduct, making it difficult for victims of police brutality to seek justice. Some cities have implemented community policing strategies to build trust and cooperation between police and communities, with mixed results. Chapter 9. Environmental injustice. The Flint water crisis exposed residents to high levels of lead, causing severe health problems, particularly in children, and highlighting environmental racism. Low-income and minority communities are often located near industrial facilities, leading to higher exposure to pollutants and associated health issues like asthma and cancer. Poorer communities are more vulnerable to the effects of climate change, such as extreme weather events and rising sea levels, due to limited resources for adaptation and recovery. Many hazardous waste sites are located near low-income and minority communities, leading to higher risks of exposure to toxic substances and associated health problems. Energy insecurity is a significant issue for low-income households, making it difficult to maintain safe and comfortable living conditions. Many rural and low-income communities lack access to clean and safe drinking water, impacting their health and well-being. Urban and rural areas with limited access to affordable and nutritious food contribute to poor health outcomes and diet-related diseases in low-income communities. Grassroots organizations and activists have been fighting for environmental justice, seeking to address the disproportionate impact of environmental issues on marginalized communities. Chapter 10. Political and social polarization. The US has become increasingly politically polarized, with deep divisions between Democrats and Republicans on key issues such as healthcare, immigration, and climate change. Media outlets, particularly cable news and social media, often contribute to polarization by promoting partisan perspectives and sensationalism. Movements like Black Lives Matter and the Capitol riots have highlighted deep social and political divides, reflecting differing views on issues of justice, equality, and democracy. Trust in institutions such as the government, media, and the judicial system has declined, contributing to a sense of disillusionment and instability. Despite challenges, many Americans are actively engaged in civic activities, from protesting and voting to volunteering and community organizing, seeking to address issues and create change. The divisive and often hostile political climate has taken a toll on mental health, with many experiencing anxiety, stress, and feelings of helplessness. The dark and painful truths of living in the US reveal significant challenges that require urgent attention and action. From economic disparities to mental health crises, addressing these issues is crucial for building a more equitable and just society. And that's it from this video. See you in the next one.